Now, Corey Lewandowski joining us now, former Trump campaign manager, was there from the beginning, turned the lights on. The first hire made by Trump started January 2nd, 2015. And we talked early then and, of course, got together. And there'd be no President Trump without Corey Lewandowski. I can say that. I worked with him very closely at the beginning when it was just him and he had a couple people. And they were running an entire campaign off an iPhone with like 4 people in a plane. Pretty amazing what they've done. Plus, you got to read his book. In fact, I kind of read some of it, but I finally read it cover to cover again on the plane ride over to Qatar last week. Let Trump Be Trump. It is a great read. You got to read it. It's going to bring you back to why the president got elected. It's going to bring you back to the roots. And plus, it's a fun read. There's all kinds of funny anecdotes in there. But you got to read it. Go to Amazon. That's all you got to do. Go to Amazon. Let Trump Be Trump. Corey Lewandowski and Dave Bossie wrote the book. And it's a must-read if you're a Trump supporter. It's going to invigorate you because it's going to get you back to why you voted for the guy in the first place and why you were attracted to him and all that good stuff in making America great again. Amazon.com. Let Trump Be Trump. Hey, Corey, great to have you with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me back on, John, and thank you for that warm introduction. You know, the book really was an opportunity for Dave and I to talk about how historic of a campaign this was and to remind people of exactly what President Trump accomplished by not only beating 16 candidates in the Republican primary field, but by defeating the entire Clinton cabal.
It was pretty amazing. And just to give you one excerpt in there is when you went to him after Iowa, which, I mean, I never thought you guys would win Iowa. I mean, I remember telling you way back, if you finished like second or third, that was good. I always thought you'd win New Hampshire and then South Carolina, and that would be the pathway. But, I mean, Iowa's just a tough state with the way it's set up with the caucuses and stuff. And I read in the book where the president was just complaining about Cruz and, you know, what he did with the Dr. Carson and how they kind of cheated. And there was a piece in the book where he was slipping in New Hampshire and you went to him and you had like the Come to Jesus meeting. And you said, Mr. Trump, you've got to change this and get positive and tell people in New Hampshire why you want to be president, not what happened in Iowa and why you're mad about it. And then he did that. He took your advice. He did that and went on to a smashing victory in New Hampshire. Of course, we were there. And that was basically it. That's when the whole thing took off.
Great
John,
advice.
You're
exactly right. It was a very, very special night in New Hampshire. He won by 19 points at that point. The field still had 15 candidates.
Right.
He won over 1 for 49. John Kasich, we call him. John Kasich won one primary. And we beat John that night by 19 points in New Hampshire. Then the president, then candidate Trump went on to win, as you remember, in South Carolina. Jeb Bush got out of the race. And we went on to Nevada, and I think Marco Rubio got out of the race. It was just race after race after race. He won 38 primaries and caucuses, and I had the privilege of sitting next to him and being part of that journey. And it was very amazing for just a very average guy like me to be part of that.
Got to read the book, Let Trump Be Trump. It is a fun read. But it's like I had read it, like, you know, different pieces of it. But just reading it over again, cover to cover, it inspires you. It gets you back to the roots of what this movement really is about. So I encourage everybody to do that. Okay, good news. CNN, boy, this must have killed them, must have drove them nuts. They probably turned this upside down and shook it and tried to figure it out. The president up in 2 weeks by 7 points in the CNN poll. Now his favorability rating up to 42%, although that's the lowest in history at this juncture. It's only 4 points behind President Reagan and President Obama at the exact same point within the margin of error. Plus, Corey, the other good news is now he's getting a +5 favorable rating on his handling of the economy, which is the key to everything. What do you make of this?
Well, there's some very interesting things when you look at that poll. Number one, I'm sure CNN hated the fact that this poll came out so favorably to the president with a 42% approval rating. Now, is that concerning for some people? Sure it is. But if you would have looked at the polling data from CNN and most of the major networks going into election night, they all would have said that Donald Trump was going to lose this election by record margins. Now, the other important note, if you look at the Fox News poll, which came out just this week, shows that the margin for the generic ballot, meaning are you going to vote for a Republican or a
right.
Democrat, in the November election is down to 5 points. That's down by 10 points. It was a 15-point deficit before. It's now a 5-point deficit, and it is widely believed that within a 5-point margin, the Trump people will make that up, which means the Republicans are still very competitive in keeping the House of Representatives in control of Republican hands. And that is really the most important thing that's going to take place in November elections.
Can they hang on?
That's right. They will at -5, meaning the generic ballot is only a 5-point delta. The Republicans will hang on to the House, and if they hang on to the House, the president's agenda and the president's economy continues to move forward.
All right, so they can only afford to lose 24 seats. You know, the math is working against them. History's working against them. Retirements in key swing districts with incumbent Republicans that had a lot of money in name ID, that's working against them. So they've got a lot of bad things going on. And as you know, you don't have to comment on this. I'm not a fan of the White House political operation. I happen to think it really sucks. So that's working against them also. You don't have to make a comment on that. But so to me, if they hang on by 2 or 3, which I think is going to be the best they're going to do, I mean, that would be a major turnaround, because a couple of weeks ago, people were saying that the Democrats could gain 50 seats.
Well, John, you're right. And if you look historically, and you look at Obama's midterm elections, you look at Bill Clinton's midterm elections, both times those candidates, their parties lost over 50 seats, 54 and 63 seats respectively, I believe.
Yep.
And so it's traditionally a bloodbath. But what you've seen now is you've got 39 Republican members of the House who've announced they're either retiring or seeking other office. And right now the Democrats only need to take back 23 seats. And the seats that the Democrats hold, which are potential pickups for Republicans, only about a dozen or so across the country. But the significant driver is the cost, the fundraising component. Right now, the RNC is outraising the DNC. The DNC still has no money on hand. They're still in debt. The RNC has the Republican National Committee still has north of $43 million on hand. And the respective parties, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee is not doing as well as their counterparts, and the Republican Senatorial Committee is also doing very well. And so, you know, the good news is people vote with their wallets, and their wallets right now are continuing to say they support the Republicans, and that's a very positive indication for November. We have a lot of challenges, but what I do think you will see, particularly as we get closer to the elections, is Donald Trump is going to get on the road. He's going to start campaigning. He's going to dominate the media cycle like he traditionally does, and he will remind the American people what he has done on their behalf and what he needs to continue to do in order to make our country great again, and that is what drives this very strong narrative.
All right, so many of us are wondering why he's not been out more. Have you personally suggested to the president in your private conversations with him that he's got to get out and campaign?
Look, I don't want to say what my private conversations are, but I can tell you this very publicly. I think he is the greatest campaigner. He is the best messenger. He is the person that the media wants to focus on. And many people think that it is their job to keep the president from the American people. I believe it is, you know, my recommendation to get the president in front of the American people, because that is the path for success, not just for him, but for the country and for his message. He has the ability that nobody else has, which is to bypass the false narrative of the mainstream media and go directly to the American people, and only he can do that, and I think he is best when he's on the road campaigning.
I agree. John Fredericks Radio Network, live in Atlanta today. We're with former Trump campaign manager from the beginning, Corey Lewandowski. He's also one of my best friends in the world, so that's full disclosure. Also, you got to read his book, Let Trump Be Trump. I just read it again, and you got to read it. And I don't push things on the air, you know that, but I just read the thing, and I'm like, everybody's got to read this because it's so much fun. Plus, fun. It's going to put you in a good mood, too. Go to Amazon.com. Let Trump Be Trump, Corey Lewandowski. So I turned on Stormy Daniels the other day with Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes. And, you know, I remember 60 Minutes where, you know, it was like Harry Reasoner, and they did investigative reporting, and now they're spending an hour on Stormy Daniels. And I turned it on just at the point where Anderson Cooper is asking the pornographic actress if she wore a condom. I mean, what the hell is going on here? I mean, is that
you know,
like...
John, it's it's so disappointing. And look, I don't give credit a lot of times to the mainstream media, but Savannah Guthrie asked, I believe it was her attorney, some very pointed questions. And I was very pleased with the type of questions that she asked, such as, it's time to either put up or shut up, right, is what she said. And it was a very pointed question because these attorneys and Stormy Daniels, I think she said something along the fact, and I'm not making a disparaging comment here, I think her comment was, I didn't want to embarrass anybody, and so I didn't tell anybody about this. I didn't want to embarrass my family. She is a professional adult film star. That's her occupation. It's not a disparagement. It's just a fact. And so all of a sudden, she doesn't want to talk about this until it becomes a convenient time to talk about it. And now what we've seen is, she is now making the media round. She's doing the circuit, probably going to write a book. It is another person who's trying to profiteer off of this president. It is just, look, I equate this to Jim Comey and everybody else who've had interactions or potential interactions with the president who now want to cash in on it when 99% of what happens has no factual basis to it whatsoever.
Look, exactly. And my analysis of this is, well, first of all, the president denied it. And so that's good enough for me. Coupled with the fact that she denied it 3 times in writing. So I don't know where that part comes in. But look, 12 days out, she takes $130,000 because she looks at the poll numbers and says, well, this guy's going to lose. And so I might as well get $130 now because in 10 days, it's not worth anything, whatever I'm threatening. So she takes the $130, signs the agreements, the contracts, spends the money. He wins, and now she's like, well, I should get like $3 million. The whole thing is just sick. It's just ridiculous.
John, this is everything that's wrong with the mainstream media. You know what they're not talking about? They're not talking about the fact that the Dow was up almost 700 points yesterday.
Right.
They're not talking about how great the president is doing when it comes to protecting American jobs, steel workers, coal miners, the aluminum industry, right? They're not talking about the fact that we don't allow individual countries to subsidize their products and dump them on the U.S. soil anymore. We're going to stop China from stealing our intellectual property. Let's talk about the things that the American people care about, and Stormy Daniels is not one of them.
Well, I think you're 100% correct there. Now, another great decision you made, along with making me chairman of Virginia, great decision. You make so many good ones. Cambridge Analytica, you met with them 3 times and didn't hire them as a vendor. Good decision. Why?
Well, look, John. I grew up in a blue-collar town of Lowell, Massachusetts. I grew up with no privilege, no money. I'm a street fighter. That's what I have been. That's what I'll always be, and I enjoy that. And I know how to read people. I made a living reading people. And when I met the CEO of Cambridge Analytica, candidly, I thought the guy was full of crap. And so he came to me 3 times, pitching his product, and I just didn't want to work with that individual, and I didn't want to work with that company at the time. And so on all 3 occasions, I said, thank you for your time, but I'm not interested. And, hindsight sometimes is 20/20, but it looks to be like I made a good decision. And, I just made the decision on behalf of what I thought was best for the campaign. And we built our own data modeling and didn't use their resources when I was there. So it was a pretty simple decision for me just because I read people, and it was a gut feeling.
Let's get to the $1.3 trillion omnibus bill, Swaponomics. The president's signing it. A lot of people in his base think he should have just went to the mat and vetoed it. He didn't get the $25 billion he wanted for the wall. And it's $1 trillion estimated in deficit spending. And it was a crap sandwich outside of the increased military funding. If you were there, would you had advised them to sign it?
Look, I got to tell you, I thought the bill was a terrible bill. They put the president in a very difficult position. Congress had to go home, of course, and they were already gone and didn't want to stick around and do their jobs, which is so typical of them. And I think the president was right to increase military spending so that we can have a strong military. We give our men and women in uniform pay raises. He also put $6 billion in for the opiate crisis, which is so important in my home state of New Hampshire and across the country to battle that terrible, terrible epidemic. But that being said, spending is through the roof. $1 trillion more into the deficits is not what we signed up for. I think by and large it was a bad bill. I think he made the best he could out of a bad bill. But we can never have this again. It can never be allowed again. And don't forget, this is just a 6-month bill. So he gets $1.6 billion for the down payment on the wall. But it's a 6-month piece of legislation, and so we've got another opportunity before the elections to fix this problem.
We know, Corey, he's a very quick study, and he said, this isn't going to happen to me again. I'm not going to sign one of these again. I'm not going to get in this position again, and I believe him.
Yep, no, I agree too, John, and I'm a big fan, and I think what you will see moving forward is the president's going to continue to have direct conversations with House and Senate leadership, and he will make sure that his positions are very clear and very much understood before they try and send him another bad piece of legislation.
We're with Corey Lewandowski, former campaign manager for Donald Trump. He was there at the beginning. He turned the lights on and opened up the office. Corey, on Meet the Press on Sunday, I was fascinated by one thing you said in the Chuck Todd discussion, where you said if for some reason General Kelly were to leave, that you don't think the president should have a chief of staff. John F. Kennedy didn't have a chief of staff. Jimmy Carter had one on paper, but he had a very different role. And you said that the president, his style would be better served without having one. I thought that was fascinating. Can you just elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah, look, what I think is this president has done such a good job of listening to all sides of the arguments that his ability to have 4 or 5 or 6 key advisors would be something I could see him being very successful in. In other words, you have a group of individuals who have their core responsibilities inside the White House that would report directly to the president. And believe me, let me be clear. I am not advocating for John Kelly to leave the White House. Right. That's not what I'm advocating for at all. But what I am saying is if John Kelly were to leave, I don't think there's one person directly who would be in line to be the chief, and I could see a scenario where a small group or a council of individuals would be able to counsel the president, and he could take their direction and implement the way he wants to. That would work into this scenario.
When Jimmy Carter got elected president, of course, it didn't turn out so well, but I'll never forget this. When he was going through the same thing, he said, I got this job by wiping out the entire Democratic establishment field, including some really huge players, Scoop Jackson, Birch Bayh, Mo Udall. He wiped them out, and he said, I'm going to be damned if I'm going to now be controlled in the White House by the insiders who I clobbered. That was 1977. The same thing holds, right? In a certain way. All right, we're out of time. I want to thank Corey Lewandowski for being with us today. It's always good to have you on, man. Now, don't forget, Let Trump Be Trump, Corey's book, must read. Get it on Amazon by Corey Lewandowski and Dave Bossie. Let Trump Be Trump. Corey, great to have you. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. We'll be back.